The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today, a Hoop Ball presentation. I am Dan Besbris. Yes, it's true. It's true you hear my voice once again. I know. A few days off there for me. It's very unusual when not wildly pre-announced with all sorts of fanfare. Remember the last time I took a week off? We spent days talking about the Iron Man streak. Well, this one was a little bit different. A little bit of a odd circumstance, and I will mention briefly what was going on there later in the podcast. I do want to take a second here at the outset, though, to thank Adrian Benjamins and Neil Rochelani for just doing an outstanding job filling in my stead on short notice. I gave them almost no warning at all. In fact, the plan was to just skip a podcast in there, and those two guys stepped up in a big, big way. So thank you, my guys. Neil and Adrian doing a fantastic job and helping me out in just a massive, massive way. So what they've been working on is not what we're going to work on today's podcast. In fact, this was something that we were going to do late last week, but because of circumstances, it got pushed off a little bit. Today's show is almost exclusively going to be about what's going on at Hoop Ball. I promised those shows were going to be popping up here and there throughout this middle part of the offseason, and today is one of them. And don't turn the show off, by the way, because we have a couple really important things to discuss. One of them is that our benevolent overlord here at Hoop Ball, the great Aaron Brewski, is working on a B150 Redux that I think you guys are all going to truly enjoy. I got a chance to see it, a preview, a sneak peek, as it were, and it's pretty intense. So stay tuned for that. And then the big piece of the puzzle that I want to talk about on today's podcast is, remember I did a whole show about this last year as well, Hoop Ball Leagues, baby. They are here once again. What's a Hoop Ball League, you ask? Well, it's a listener league, or a reader league, or a pro league. It's all of the above, rolled into one. We had last year, and I went through and I looked at our Fantrax accounts from last season. We had, I believe, 10 leagues, if I'm not mistaken. I'll double-check my counting. Yes, I didn't write the number down, but I wrote it down in my head when I counted yesterday and then forgot to do it first thing this morning. Last year we had 10 leagues. We had 2 cash head-to-head leagues, 1 cash roto league, 3 free head-to-head leagues, 2 free roto leagues, a Hoop Ball Pro League, and a Dynasty League. All told, 10 leagues, all told about 120 participants, which is pretty cool. And I realized that, other websites have more leagues than we did, but that was the first time we'd ever done it. And it was, at times, a bit of a cluster bleep. I take full responsibility for that. Here's why. We opened up those leagues last year with the expectation that there might be like 25 of you that were interested. So I made a couple of leagues just to see how they'd go. And then whammo, just an avalanche of interest. So I'm frantically trying to open up more leagues. I'm trying to make sure that I've got the right number of teams in every one of these spots. And by the end, I think I had it fairly well sorted out. But it was really difficult to manage all of them because, frankly, I just hadn't budgeted enough time. It was a good problem to have. I'm not complaining about it in any way, but I am, by the way, making excuses as to why perhaps I could have been paying a little bit closer attention. Well, luckily, for year number 2, as Robin Williams dressed as Mrs. Doubtfire yelled, what is that now, 20 years ago? Help is on the way! You guys remember that scene, I think. Help is on the way! Help is on the way. For 2018-2019, I just mentioned him just a moment ago, Mr. Neil Rochelani will be helping out with organizing all of our listener and reader leagues. Danny Reed, Scott Douglas taking the reins of the Dynasty League, which, by the way, is full right now. But you can get on a waiting list. Spots do open up in that thing. I think we had 3 that popped loose for this coming season. They have already filled. And I'll tell you, that's going to be largely the data on today's podcast. And I'm going to tell you how to get involved in any of these listener leagues. If you want to play in a hoopball league, this is the show that tells you how to do it. There are a couple of ways. Let's start with the Dynasty League because, frankly, to me, that's the most straightforward at this point. It's a wait list. There really aren't any other options. And the sooner you get on a wait list, the sooner you'd get your name pulled when a spot opens up, whether that's, a month. Maybe somebody has to bail out. They realize they can't handle it. A year. Usually people come and go from those types of leagues. Yeah, you might not inherit the world's greatest team from somebody that pieces out. Or maybe you inherit a team that just won the championship and the guy's like, all right, did my work, I'm out. And that kind of sucks. But these are really, here's the bottom line. As hoopball continues to grow, which it has been doing at a fairly extraordinary clip, it's just going to get harder and harder to get in on these things. The demand is already there. And so if you want, now's your chance to get in near the top of the wait list, whatever that is at the point. Scott Douglas and Danny Reed can both be found on Twitter. I believe Danny Reed is at StroSwift, STROSWIFT. I'm assuming that's a Stromile Swift reference. STROSWIFT. Or maybe he's a Houston Astros fan. Maybe it's StroSwift. And Scott Douglas, well, much like myself, you can spell him, you can find him. SCOTTK, middle initial is K, DOUGLAS, at Scott K. Douglas on Twitter. So you can get a hold of those guys if you want to get on the Dynasty waiting list. They can get you hooked up. They're doing a wonderful job of managing the 24-team Hoopball Dynasty League. And if you want to be in one of the other Hoopball leagues, which I think will be the vast majority of you folks out there, there are a couple of ways you can do so. Number one, go to the Hoopball forums and post in the thread that I just started this morning. It's called Hoopball Leagues. I know. How subtle. Hoop-ball.com/forums is how you can get there, or you can just go to hoop-ball.com and click on the forums tab up near the top of the page. If you do it that way, if you do it either of those two ways, in fact, the first one, as of the time that I'm recording this podcast, is the first topic is Hoopball Leagues. Just go in there, post your interest. Myself or Neil Rochlani will get you set up in one of the leagues. What we need from you guys when you're posting your interest is which type of league you want to be in, namely one of the 4, cash head-to-head, cash roto, free head-to-head, or free roto. By the way, the cash buy-in on all of these leagues is $50, unless otherwise specified, but for right now, it's all 50, and it was all 50 last year. Fantrax will handle that. I do believe there are a couple of countries out there that have issues with paid fantasy websites. We ran into this a couple of times last season. I didn't write down which nations those were, but if you're in them, you might be relegated to the free leagues. Apologies in advance. I can't do anything about how your country interacts with Fantrax and the credit card companies. Out of our control. I wish it wasn't so, but it is. So you might be stuck in the free leagues, but generally Fantrax handles all of this stuff. As you join the cash leagues, it will ask for a payment. Credit cards are accepted through Fantrax, which is kind of nice. And then Fantrax will just hold the money all year, and Hoopball can distribute it at the end of the season. It's a pretty easy way to do it. All of the head-to-head leagues will have 12 teams. That is almost a promise. We managed to get there last year. If we hit 12 and there's a little bit more interest, like if there's 2 of you, I might move one of them to a 14-team league. But if it's like 5 or 6 additional bodies, what we'd have to do at that point is get more people before we open up the league. I don't want to have like an 8-teamer just dangling at the end of our list of leagues here. That's stupid. And more than anything, we want you guys to have fun in these leagues, playing against other hoopball readers, other hoopball listeners, and there are going to be hoopball pros mixed into these leagues as well. So we want them to be fun. We don't want you to be in an 8-team league with the last 7 other people that didn't quite get their interest in time. So the head-to-head leagues are going to be 12 teams. The roto leagues will probably be around 12 teams, but luckily you don't need an even number. So if there's an 11 or a 13 or a 10 or a 14 floating around in there, it really won't be the end of the world. It doesn't change strategy all that much. I've been in an 11-team league myself personally for many years, and it's fun. And it's just as fun. It's a tiny bit easier to find good players, but it really does come down to the competition more than the number of teams in that spot. All that to say, if you go into that Hoopball Leagues forum post, you post your interest, let us know which type of league you'd like to be in of the 4 that I just listed. And we do need your email address because we want to make sure that we can get a hold of everybody in these leagues quickly. Things happen, whether there needs to be votes on trades or if with somebody, we did have an issue last year in one league of teams apparently working in cahoots with one another. These types of things require messages. We'd like to get messages to you about things going on at Hoopball. You kind of become one of the insider crew by being in these leagues. You're going to get notes. It's not going to be over the top, a meme, an email here and there. If it doesn't interest you, you can delete it. If it's related to your league, then great. It'll be wonderful that you get it. So we need your choice of which type of league you want to be in, and we need a really good way to contact you. That's not a stupid Twitter DM. Those get annoying. I did almost all of the communication last year through Twitter, and it was just too much. It was too much to organize. The DMs disappear after a certain amount of time. There were, like I said, hundreds of people interested in this stuff, and so I'm trying to scroll through and figure out which person has which Twitter handle. No, we're not doing that again. So we need email this year and choice of league. You can post that in the Hoopball forums. There are 2 other ways, actually. There are 2 other ways that you can get involved in these listener leagues. One of them is the Hoopball Facebook page. I'm not even sure many of you know that we have a Hoopball Facebook page, but we do. You can go to facebook.com/hoopballhoops. I don't know. I say that on a podcast, and then as I'm saying it, I realize that's sort of a hard thing to translate in audio. Hoopball Hoops is the Facebook page. Hoopball, like the name of the website, and then hoops, plural. HOOPBALLHOOPS. There is a thread at the Facebook page where it's asking people if they want to be involved in the Hoopball Reader or Listener Leagues. You can ask how. We can get you connected over there, basically the same way as the forum. And the other way, and this one might simply be the fastest because it gets you straight to the guy that's doing league placement, which, as I mentioned, is Neil Rochlani this season, and that's Twitter. I think a lot of you already follow me on Twitter, at Dan Besbris, and most of you probably also already follow Hoopball on Twitter, which is at Hoopball Fantasy. What you need to do to get involved in these leagues on Twitter is to follow me, Hoopball, and Neil. The 3 of us. You need to be following all 3 of us at Hoopball Fantasy, at Ball with Neil, and at Dan Besbris, and send us a note. All 3, just send a note saying you're interested. And that one, Neil will see that immediately, and he can get you placed in a league. Easy enough, right? Right. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about the Hoopball Leagues this year. We have things more organized than we have in the past. Any problems that you felt existed in the Hoopball Leagues last year, we're hoping that they will be addressed going into this season. And it's going to be a wingding. The one thing that I think people may have in particular disliked last season is that the Cash Roto League was a daily moves league with a games cap. We're eliminating that style of play for this season. Too many things going on. Too much roster churn which is a thing, by the way. I don't know if you guys, the term roster churn reminds me of, when I was like 8 years old or 9 years old, Street Fighter 2 Turbo came out. You guys old enough to remember that game? Street Fighter 2 Turbo Championship Edition. I think that was early 90s, right? I'm 35 now. And I went to an arcade. My parents took me to an arcade, and I sat there on the Street Fighter 2 Turbo machine just whomping these teenagers who started yelling at me that I was cheesing them. But I didn't know what that meant. I was a little kid. I was an elementary school kid. Well, apparently, the act of cheesing is doing a move to somebody over and over again that doesn't allow them to actually stand up and fight back. And that is effectively what roster churn is in fantasy. It's another word. It's terminology that is needlessly goofy for something that's just bad sportsmanship. And you see that a bit in a hyper-competitive daily roto league. So the choices I had on that front, explaining myself here in what's becoming already a pedantic look at this part of the podcast, either you eliminate waiver wire, or you make it like half a day, or you eliminate the daily stuff. And so that's the direction we took. So all of the leagues this year are weekly. You make your moves on Mondays. If you're trying to max out games played, you get your guys in there that have more games. If you're trying to shoot for just best value, this is why, by the way, the Aaron Brewski's weekly lineup show is relevant. A lot of weekly leagues out there, and that includes our Roto leagues this year as well. So no games cap now in the Roto League, but it is weekly. It brings another element of strategy in there. We've also expanded the benches and eliminated the injured reserve slots. Injured reserve slots are stupid. They're helpful if you only have 3 bench slots, but if you have more bench slots, then they're just dumb, because then you've got this guy you're stashing effectively on your bench, but if that dude gets healthy, then you have to bring him off of the injured reserve in order to make any other moves to your roster. It hamstrings you in a way that a traditional bench slot does not. So we've expanded benches and eliminated injured reserve. It makes the draft 1 round longer. And if you want to stash an injured guy, you still can. It's just going to be using up a bench slot instead of the IR, and you don't have to worry about moving guys in and out of that space while roster jockeying. So that'll make things just a little bit simpler for folks as well. Almost all of the leagues are 9 category right now, although by request, we can certainly switch that up and maybe get an 8-cat league going as well. The issue is it's just trying to streamline these things, and then you start to do stuff by request, it does get a little bit harder. So right now it's all 9-cat, but if we have 10 of you guys that all come forward and say, hey, let's, we want an 8-cat roto or something like that, then we can get that going as well. So please do let us know in one of those 3 methods how you'd like to get involved and which league, and we'll get an email address from you so we can make sure that we communicate to you in these leagues in the fastest way possible. Again, those are the Hoopball forums, the Hoopball Facebook page, and Twitter, me, Neil, and the Hoopball account. Once again, I do want to take a second to thank Adrian Benjamin and Neil Rochelani for covering for me these last few days. I do also want to take one moment here at the end of the podcast, provided I can get through it, to let you guys know what's been going on. So as many of you likely remember, Wednesday of last week, I announced on Twitter that the Hoopball reader and listener leagues were about to open. The plan initially was to open them up later that evening with some fanfare on Twitter, do a podcast the next day that discussed sort of how it all shook out, let you know, like we did on today's pod, how you can get involved in those listener and reader leagues, and then have them open through the weekend with, reminders, forum posts, Twitter stuff, and whatnot, leading into this week as well. Well, midway through the late afternoon on Wednesday, I did find out that my father passed away suddenly, and that threw things into a bit of a state of disarray. So that's all been taken care of over the last few days. You guys know on this podcast that I am of the Jewish faith. It's something that is handled very quickly in this religion. So the funeral was Sunday, and now it's all about sort of trying to figure out how to get back to normal. I don't really want to talk about it a ton on Twitter. I did sort of, I felt the need to let you guys know why I disappeared. I'll probably make a post about it on social media as well. Again, please do try to withhold remarks about it. It's just not something that I want to spend all of my time thinking about because, frankly, it's basically what I'm spending all of my time thinking about anyway. Thank you for whatever thoughts you can send my way without actually writing them down. And hopefully now this will be the start of me getting back to some measure of normalcy. I don't have any deep thoughts on how all of the world should proceed with your lives. But again, the same old stuff. Cherish moments with your loved ones as long as you have them. All right, that's all I'm going to do at the end of this thing. I don't want to make it a sad pod, but that's where I disappeared to. This is Dan Besbris for Fantasy NBA Today, a hoopball presentation. Again, let's get back into the fun stuff. Let's get these listener leagues going. Let's make them bigger than last year. Again, we had 120 people in listener leagues last year. 200 is the goal for this season. Let us know. Twitter, the forums, Facebook. We'll get you in. We'll do it soon. I'm Dan. Neil's in charge. So if something goes wrong, blame him. With that, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.